There is something you have wondered about in the quiet hours, maybe late at night when the house is finally silent and there is no one left to perform for, no argument to survive, no mood to manage. You have wondered whether the person who hurt you ever feels it too. Whether somewhere beneath all that certainty and coldness, there is a flicker of shame, a private moment where they know exactly what they did to you. And the answer, the one almost no one explains clearly, is more complicated and more freeing than you have been led to believe. Because, yes, in many cases, the shame is there. It exists. But it is buried so deep, guarded so fiercely, and wrapped in so many layers of defense that it will almost never reach the surface, and it will almost never reach you. And once you understand why, something inside you begins to loosen, a grip you did not even realize was still there. Before we go deeper into this, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel because what we do here is not about staying angry or keeping score. It is about helping you understand what actually happened to you so you can stop replaying it, regain your clarity, rebuild the self-worth that was slowly eroded, and recognize manipulation early enough that it can never take root in your life again. If that is the kind of understanding you have been searching for, this is a place built for people exactly like you. And staying with this community will keep reminding you that healing is not only possible, but already beginning. Now let us sit with the real question, because you deserve a real answer and not a comforting slogan. The narcissist you knew is not, in most cases, a person incapable of feeling anything. That is a myth that makes them sound like something inhuman, and it actually keeps you confused because you remember moments that felt real, moments of warmth, of apology, of what looked like vulnerability. What you are dealing with is not an absence of emotion, but a catastrophic inability to tolerate certain emotions, and shame sits at the very top of that list. To understand this, you have to understand the structure of the personality itself, the thing psychologists often call the false self. Somewhere early in their development, usually long before you ever met them, this person learned that who they truly were felt unacceptable, unlovable, or unsafe to reveal. So they built something over it, a constructed image, a performance of superiority, charm, competence, or importance that they present to the world and, crucially, to themselves. This false self is not a strategy they consciously chose. It is a survival structure, and they depend on it the way you depend on air. Here is why that matters to you. Every time you ask a narcissist to genuinely acknowledge that they hurt you, you are not asking them for a simple apology. You are asking them to briefly step outside the very structure that keeps them psychologically stable. To admit fault at the deep level you are hoping for, they would have to feel the shame directly, and their entire personality is organized around never feeling that. This is the piece that reframes everything. Their refusal to take accountability is not proof that they did not notice the harm. Very often it is proof of the opposite. The harm registered so deeply that it triggered a threat their psyche is not equipped to survive, so the defenses slammed shut before the feeling could ever be named. And those defenses have names. When you saw denial, flat and absolute, refusing to acknowledge things you both know happened, you were watching shame be pushed underground. When you saw projection, when suddenly you were the controlling one, the abusive one, the unstable one, you were watching them take the unbearable feeling inside themselves and place it onto you, because it is easier to see it in someone else than to feel it in their own body. When they shifted the blame, when every conversation about your pain somehow became a conversation about what you did wrong, that was not a debate tactic. That was an escape from an internal state they could not tolerate. Blame shifting is not really about you. It is about them getting away from themselves. Gaslighting works the same way, though it cuts deeper. When they insisted your memory was wrong, that you were too sensitive, that the thing that happened did not happen the way you know it did, part of what they were doing was rewriting reality so they would not have to stand inside the version where they were the one who caused harm. And here is something painful and important. Over time, they may not even be lying in the way you assume. Many people with these traits genuinely distort their own memories. They revise the past not just to control you, but to protect themselves. And the revised version becomes what they actually believe. This is why arguing about the facts almost never works. You are bringing evidence to someone whose psychological survival depends on not being able to see it. Then there is grandiosity, the inflation, the constant reminders of how impressive or right or superior they are. It looks like arrogance, and it functions like a shield. The bigger the display of superiority, the more effort is being spent covering something fragile underneath. This is one of the great paradoxes you have to understand. The most inflated exterior often sits directly on top of the most fragile interior, and rage, the sudden disproportionate fury that seemed to come from nowhere over something small, that is what happens when the shield is threatened. Psychologists call it narcissistic injury, and narcissistic rage is the immediate defensive explosion that follows it. When you unknowingly touched the shame, when you said something that briefly cracked the image, the reaction was not proportional to your words. It was proportional to the terror of the exposed self underneath. Even the silent treatment, that cold withdrawal that left you anxious and confused, serves the same function. When they cannot win, cannot control the narrative, and cannot tolerate what they might feel if they stayed present, they disappear emotionally. It punishes you, yes, but it also protects them from a confrontation with themselves. The same is true of the smear campaign, the triangulation, the pulling of other people into your relationship to validate their version of events. When they told others a distorted story about you, part of what they were doing was building an external reality that agreed with them, so the internal reality they cannot face never has to surface. If enough people believe their story, they get to believe it too. So I want to be very clear with you because this is where so many survivors get trapped. The presence of hidden shame is real, but hidden shame is not the same thing as guilt, and it is absolutely not the same thing as accountability, empathy, remorse, or change. This distinction is everything, so let it settle. Guilt, in a psychologically healthy sense, sounds like I did something bad, and it leads toward repair. It is focused on the action, and it motivates you to make things right. Shame, particularly the toxic shame that lives inside these personalities, sounds like I am bad, and it leads toward defense, concealment, and escape. Guilt can build bridges. Toxic shame builds walls. When you hope that their shame will eventually turn into a real apology, you are hoping that shame will behave like guilt, and it almost never does, because they are not the same emotion, and they do not travel toward the same destination. This is why you can stop waiting. You can stop analyzing every text, every look, every rare moment of near softness for evidence that they finally understand. Because even if they do understand, even if in some private hour they know exactly what they did, that knowing does not obligate them to act on it, and their psychology is built specifically to prevent them from acting on it. Internal shame is not readiness to change. It is not the seed of growth you keep hoping to water. Sometimes it is just pain with nowhere to go, sealed off behind defenses that have protected them their whole life and will keep protecting them long after you are gone. And I know why this is so hard to release because your own mind was conditioned to stay attached to the question. This is where we have to talk about what actually happened to you, not to them. If you were in a relationship marked by these patterns, you were very likely subjected to something called intermittent reinforcement. The affection, the warmth, the moments of connection did not come consistently. They came unpredictably, mixed in with the coldness and the cruelty. An unpredictable reward is the most powerful conditioning pattern that exists. It is the same mechanism that makes a slot machine so difficult to walk away from. Your nervous system learned that if you just endured a little more, if you just got it right this time, the warmth might return. That is the trauma bond. It is not weakness and it is not love in the way you were taught to think of love. It is a physiological attachment forged through cycles of distress and relief, and it is why leaving felt like withdrawal and why part of you may still ache for someone who hurt you. That same conditioning is what keeps you circling the question of their secret shame. You are still hoping for the reward. You are still waiting for the moment where they finally see you, finally validate the reality you lived through, finally give you the acknowledgement that would make the pain make sense. And underneath that hope is cognitive dissonance, the deep discomfort of holding two truths at once, that this person meant so much to you and that this person caused you real harm. Your mind wants to resolve that tension, and one of the ways it tries is by imagining that they secretly regret it, Because if they secretly regret it, then maybe the person you loved was real after all. I want you to notice that move gently, because it is the very mechanism keeping you tethered. If this is landing somewhere real in you, I want to pause and ask you again to subscribe, because clarity like this is not a one time realization. It is something you rebuild day after day, and having steady, grounded understanding around you is part of how the confusion finally lifts. This community exists to help you break free from the fog, to hand you the language for things you lived through but could never quite explain, and to remind you that reclaiming your life is not a fantasy, but a process already underway. Staying here means you keep choosing your own understanding over their distortion, and that is exactly the muscle that healing strengthens. So let us turn fully now toward you, because this is where your power actually lives. The first thing to understand is that self blame was never yours to carry. In the aftermath of this kind of relationship, the mind often turns inward and asks what it could have done differently, how it failed, why it was not enough. That self blame is not a character flaw, it is a symptom of the conditioning. You were trained to believe the problem was you because a person who takes responsibility for someone else's cruelty is a person who is easy to control. Releasing that blame is not about excusing yourself for imperfect moments. It is about correctly locating the responsibility for the harm, which was never yours to hold. Then comes grief, and I do not want to rush you past it, because grief is not a detour from healing, it is the healing. You are not only grieving the person, you are grieving the version of the relationship you believed in, the future you imagined, the person you thought they were during the good moments, and even the person you were before all of this. That is a profound loss, and it deserves to be honored rather than hurried. Real healing does not mean you stop feeling. It means the feeling stops running your life. As the grief moves through you, something else becomes possible, and that is emotional detachment. Not the cold, forced numbness people sometimes mistake it for, but a genuine loosening of the emotional charge. There comes a point where you can think of them and feel less pull, where their opinion of you weighs less, where the question of whether they are secretly ashamed simply matters less than it used to. That is not you becoming hard, that is you becoming free. Detachment is what happens when you finally take back the emotional energy you were pouring into someone who could never return it. And underneath all of this, your body has its own recovery to do, because trauma does not live only in your thoughts. It lives in your nervous system. If you spent months or years scanning for danger, reading micro expressions, bracing for the next shift in mood, your body learned to live in a state of alert. That is why you may feel anxious, exhausted, hypervigilant, or strangely fragile even after the relationship has ended. Healing the nervous system is slow and physical work. It happens through safety repeated over time, through rest, through relationships that do not require you to brace, through the gradual relearning that you are allowed to relax. Be patient with your body. It protected you the only way it knew how, and it deserves your gentleness now. From this steadier ground, you begin to rebuild the two things that were most damaged: your self-trust and your identity. Self-trust erodes in these relationships because you were repeatedly told that your perceptions were wrong. So you learn to doubt yourself, to check with them, to question your own reality. Rebuilding self-trust means slowly proving to yourself that your perceptions are valid, that your feelings carry information, that you can rely on your own read of a situation again. And identity, that returns too. So much of who you were may have been organized around them, around managing them, pleasing them, surviving them. As that pressure lifts, you get to rediscover what you actually enjoy, what you believe, what you want, who you are when no one is manipulating the mirror. That rediscovery is not selfish. It is the whole point. This is where boundaries become not a technique, but an expression of your restored self. A boundary is not something you enforce on them. It is something you hold for you. It is the line that says, "This is what I will and will not allow into my life." And it does not require their agreement, their understanding, or their permission. In fact, expecting a narcissistic person to respect your boundaries is often another way of keeping yourself entangled. The power of a boundary is that you hold it regardless of their response. You do not need them to change for you to be safe. You only need to stop handing them the key. And so we arrive at the deepest reframe of all. For so long, your emotional life was organized around their approval, their moods, their denial, and their hidden interior. Whether they secretly regretted it, whether they finally understood, whether they might one day admit the truth. But every hour you spend inside their psychology is an hour you are not spending inside your own life. Your freedom does not depend on them ever admitting anything. Your healing does not require their confession. You will never get the apology in the exact form you deserved. And here is the liberating part: you do not need it. You are allowed to close the account without the payment you were owed, not because the debt was not real, but because your peace is worth more than their acknowledgement ever could be. You reclaim your power the moment their approval stops being the currency of your self-worth. When you no longer need them to validate what happened, when you trust your own memory of your own life, when your nervous system settles and your identity returns and your boundaries hold without apology, you have stepped into something they can never touch. Their secret shame, if it exists, becomes irrelevant, not because you have stopped caring about truth, but because you have stopped waiting for them to hand you a truth you already possess. You know what happened, you lived it, you survived it, and no distortion, no denial, no rewritten history, no silence can take from you the fact that you are still here, still becoming, still capable of a life shaped entirely by your own hands. So, as you sit with all of this, I want you to notice that the question you started with has quietly changed. You came in wondering whether they are secretly ashamed of how they treated you. And somewhere along the way, that question loosened its grip because you are beginning to sense that the answer was never going to set you free the way you thought it would. What sets you free is here, inside you, in the slow and steady work of coming home to yourself. And that work is only beginning to reveal what it can become, because the version of you on the other side of this healing is someone you have not fully met yet. And the more you understand about how all of this really operates, the closer you get to meeting them, which is exactly where we will keep going from here.